I'm Jess, and welcome to the Deep Blue Diaries. Today I'm going to tell you a story about a seal named Reina. Reina was rescued by the Marine Mammal Center. The Deep Blue Diaries podcast is not affiliated with or in partnership with the Marine Mammal Center. The facts of the story are taken from the Marine Mammal Center website. The reason that Reina needed to be rescued, her diagnosis, prognosis, and subsequent treatment are all factual. Names, dialogue, imagery, and other details are descriptive narrative to bring these animals to life and highlight the important work these organizations do. Reina was a creature of the deep blue. Born in the frigid waters of the northern Pacific, she knew the ocean as her playground, her sanctuary, and her home. The constant ebb and flow of the sea guided her life. The northern fur seal had spent most of her days gliding effortlessly through the water, her sleek body cutting through the waves like a knife. The only times she had ventured to land were during the breeding seasons on the rocky shores of the Pribilof Islands, where the colonies gathered in noisy, bustling congregations. She had a deep charcoal gray coat, thick and lush to protect her from the icy waters, and long, elegant whiskers that rippled in the currents as she swam. Her eyes, large and dark like polished obsidian, were both curious and alert, constantly scanning the underwater for prey. Reina was a skilled hunter, darting through schools of fish with agility and precision, selecting the plumpest ones to devour in a flash. The ocean was a place of plenty for her. Each dive brought her closer to the bounty of the sea. Fat anchovies, herring, squid, which she chased through the murky depths. She'd been taught by her mother to read the subtle changes in water temperatures and pressure, to sense the presence of prey or the threat of predators like orcas and great white sharks. On this particular day, the sun hung high in the sky, casting a shimmering mosaic of light onto the surface of the water. Reina frolicked with a group of young seals, weaving around each other in playful circles, taking turns to leap above the surface and then diving back down into the cold, refreshing depths. It was a time of plenty. The fish were abundant and her belly was full. But then things began to change. Reina noticed the water felt different. It was warmer than usual. The fish she chased after seemed to be acting strangely. They swam erratically, darting in confused, unpredictable patterns. She caught a few, but they tasted off. Not the clean, salty flavor she was used to, but something bitter and metallic. Confused, she spat out the last few bites, letting the pieces of fish sink slowly into the inky darkness. Something was wrong. She could sense it. Yet she didn't understand. How could she? The ocean, her home, was becoming dangerous in ways that she could not comprehend. In the days that followed, Reina's world began to unravel. The fish were scarcer, and those she did catch left her feeling nauseous and unsteady. Her body, once strong and swift, grew sluggish. It became harder to stay with her group, and she soon found herself lagging behind, watching the others dart away in the distance. Strange sensations plagued her. At times, her head would throb painfully, and a dizzying wave of disorientation would overcome her. She began to avoid the deeper waters that she once loved, sticking closer to the surface where the sun could warm her aching muscles. The vibrant, energetic seal was fading. Hunger and confusion clouded her once bright eyes. One morning, as the sun struggled to rise behind the blanket of thick, low-hanging fog, Reina felt a sudden overpowering urge to rest. Her limbs, normally so powerful and coordinated, felt heavy and unresponsive. She floated listlessly on the surface, her head drooping. A powerful wave lifted her, pushing her close to the shore, closer than she'd been in months. The beach loomed ahead, a jagged line of sand and rocks. It wasn't breeding season. She had no reason to be there, and yet she couldn't resist the pull of the shore. With a final exhausted push of her flippers, she let the waves carry her onto the sand where she collapsed in a heap. Lying there on the beach, Reina felt the world tilt and spin around her. The sky seemed too close, the colors too bright. Her senses were overwhelmed, and she closed her eyes to shut it all out. She was dimly aware of the sound of the waves crashing behind her, the cry of the seagulls overhead, and then nothing. A lone fur seal, her once vibrant coat was now matted and dull, clinging to a body that seemed far too thin for her frame. It wasn't long before she was spotted by a group of beachgoers. The sight of a northern fur seal so far from its usual territory was unusual enough, but the way she lay there, lifeless, unmoving, alarmed them. A crowd began to gather at a respectful distance, murmuring softly amongst themselves. They snapped a few photos, unsure of what else to do. It was then that someone placed a call to the Marine Mammal Center, explaining the situation to the operator on the other end. Within an hour, a team of rescuers arrived, moving quickly and efficiently with practiced expertise. The team worked methodically, assessing Reina's condition before carefully wrapping her in a specially designed rescue sling. They could see she was alive, but only barely. Her breathing was shallow and her whiskers twitched weakly when they touched her. With every movement, her head lolled slightly to the side, as if she could barely muster the strength to keep it upright. The rescuers loaded Reina into their transport vehicle, keeping her body wet and cool with damp towels. The drive to the Marine Mammal Center was tense. They knew time was of the essence. Domoic acid, a neurotoxin produced by certain types of algae, had been wreaking havoc along the coast in recent years. It was absorbed by small fish and shellfish, which in turn were eaten by larger marine mammals like seals, sea lions, and even whales. The toxin could cause disorientation, seizures, and eventually death if not treated quickly. Once at the center's treatment facility, Reina was placed in a small enclosure. The veterinarians and animal care staff worked around her, attaching an IV line to deliver fluids and monitoring her vital signs closely. They slowly fed her pieces of fish that had been tested to ensure they were free of toxins, coaxing her to eat even as she lay there, too weak to respond. The first few days were critical. Reina's body slowly began to stabilize, and the effects of the toxin began to fade. But it was clear she had been suffering for a long time before she had washed ashore. Her weight was dangerously low, and it would take weeks of careful feeding and monitoring to bring her back to full strength. Yet the team saw signs of hope. Reina's eyes, which had been glazed and unfocused, began to regain their clarity. She started responding to the caretaker's touch, her whiskers twitching, her head lifting weakly whenever someone entered her enclosure. The days turned into weeks, and slowly but surely, Reina began to regain her strength. Her muscles, once weak and shaky, grew stronger as she moved around her enclosure. The caretakers increased her diet, offering her large portions of fish and squid, all carefully sourced to ensure they were free of domoic acid. Each meal was a small victory, and with every bite, Reina grew closer to the strong, vibrant seal she had once been. Reina's enclosure was set up to mimic the natural environment as closely as possible. A shallow pool allowed her to swim and exercise her limbs, while rocky platforms provided places to rest and bask in the sun. Reina's rehabilitation was not without its setbacks. There were days when she seemed lethargic, and the team would worry that the toxin had done more damage than they initially thought. But each time she bounced back, pushing through the challenges with a resilience that inspired everyone around her. She had a fighting spirit, almost as if she knew she was meant to go back to the ocean. And go back she would. After nearly a month of intensive care and rehabilitation, Reina had put on enough weight and regained her strength. Her coat was glossy and full, and she moved with the confidence and grace of a healthy northern fur seal. The day of her release drew near, and there was an air of excitement at the Marine Mammal Center. The release site was a secluded beach, far from the bustling human activity that had surrounded Reina during her recovery. The sky was overcast, the clouds hanging low and heavy over the water. The sound of waves crashing against the shore filled the air as the rescue team carefully lifted Reina's transport crate from the truck and carried it to the water's edge. Reina's whiskers twitched as she caught the scent of the sea on the breeze. She shifted inside the crate, her powerful muscles tensing with anticipation. The crate's door was slowly lifted, and for a moment, she hesitated, her eyes wide as she took in the sight of the ocean stretching out before her. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, Reina leapt from the crate and landed on the wet sand. She paused, turning her head back towards the humans who had cared for her. and let out a short, sharp bark. A farewell, a thank you, perhaps just a goodbye. And then she was off. Reina surged forward, her flippers propelling her towards the waves. The cold water rushed around her, enveloping her in a familiar embrace. She pushed off with a powerful kick and dove beneath the surface, feeling the cool, salty water wash over her sleek body. She swam out into the deep, the water parting smoothly around her. It was as if she'd never left. Her body remembered the rhythms of the ocean, the subtle currents that guided her movements. She twisted and turned, reveling in the freedom of the sea. She could feel the strength in her muscles, the life returning to her with every beat of her heart. The ocean welcomed her back with open arms, and Reina swam and swam, chasing after fish and darting through the underwater kelp forests. She felt alive again, whole. The faint memory of the sickness and the humans who had cared for her faded into the background. And all that mattered now was the ocean, the thrill of the chase, and the promise of endless horizons. She surfaced once, far from the shore, the salty breeze ruffling the fur along her back. For a moment, she lingered, gazing back towards the land where she had been given a second chance. The humans had been kind to her, helping her when she was at her weakest. She would remember that. With a flick of her tail, Reina drove back into the depths, her sleek form disappearing into the blue. She was home. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jess. The California Marine Mammal Center advances ocean health through marine mammal rescue and rehabilitation, research, and education. If you'd like to learn more about Reina and the important work that the Marine Mammal Center does, you can visit them at marinemammalcenter.org. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, or Snapchat, JessthePrequelDoesMiami, all one word. Check the show notes for links to the Marine Mammal Center, as well as links to all of their social media channels and mine. Can't wait to talk to you guys next time.